The morning sun cast long shadows across Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona, as Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez made his routine walk through the aircraft maintenance area. The familiar sounds of jet engines warming up and the constant chatter of ground crews filled the air. Mike had been a crew chief for 8 years, and he knew every inch of this place like the back of his hand. As he rounded the corner near Hangar 7, something caught his eye. There was someone working on one of the A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft. But it wasn't anyone from his team. The figure was smaller than most of the maintenance crew, moving with precise, practiced motions as they cleaned the aircraft's exterior. Mike squinted against the morning glare. The person wore standard Air Force maintenance coveralls, but something seemed different. The way they moved around the aircraft showed deep familiarity with the machine. Their cleaning technique was methodical, almost reverent, as they worked on the nose section of the heavily armored attack aircraft. The A-10, nicknamed the Warthog, was a beast of a machine designed for close air support missions. Its titanium armor and powerful GAU-8 cannon made it a legend among ground troops who depended on its protection. But this particular aircraft had been grounded for 3 weeks due to a hydraulic system failure that had proven more complex than initially expected. Mike decided to investigate. As he walked closer, he could see the person was a woman, which wasn't unusual in today's Air Force. What was unusual was that he didn't recognize her. And Mike knew everyone who worked in this section. The woman appeared to be in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Her movements were efficient and purposeful as she worked on cleaning carbon scoring from around the aircraft's gun ports. "Morning," Mike called out as he approached. "I'm Mike Rodriguez, crew chief for this section. I don't think we've met." The woman looked up from her work, and Mike was struck by her intense green eyes. There was something in her expression that spoke of experience beyond her apparent years. She had the weathered look of someone who had spent serious time around aircraft, but there was also something else. A kind of focused intensity that Mike had only seen in combat veterans. "Sarah Mitchell," she replied, extending a gloved hand. Her grip was firm and calloused. "I'm here on temporary assignment. They said this bird needed some attention." Mike nodded, though he couldn't recall receiving any paperwork about temporary personnel. In the military, paperwork usually preceded everything. But sometimes things moved faster than the bureaucracy could keep up. "What's your background? You seem to know your way around the hog." Sarah's expression softened slightly, and for a moment, Mike thought he saw a flicker of something. Pride, maybe, or nostalgia. "I've worked on A-10 seconds before. Different base, different time. This old girl just needs someone who understands her quirks." As Sarah spoke, Mike noticed how naturally she referred to the aircraft. Most maintenance personnel developed an attachment to the planes they worked on. But there was something deeper in Sarah's voice. It was the way a pilot might talk about their aircraft, with a mixture of respect and affection that came from shared experiences. "Which base were you stationed at before?" Mike asked, his curiosity growing. "Several different ones over the years," Sarah replied, returning to her work. "You move around a lot in this job." Mike watched as she continued cleaning the aircraft. Her technique was flawless. She knew exactly where to look for stress points, how to clean around sensitive equipment, and which areas required the most attention. This wasn't the work of someone who had simply been trained on A-10 maintenance. This was someone who had lived and breathed these aircraft. The morning progressed, and other members of Mike's team began arriving for the day shift. Each one noticed the new worker and introduced themselves. But Sarah kept the conversations brief and professional. She answered questions about her work methods when asked, offering insights that impressed the experienced mechanics. But she volunteered little about herself. Around 10 o'clock, Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, the squadron commander, made his usual morning rounds. Mike watched as the colonel's eyes settled on Sarah, and he could see the same curiosity that he himself had felt earlier. "Rodriguez," the colonel called out. "Who's the new team member?" "Sarah Mitchell, sir." "Temporary assignment for maintenance support," Mike replied, realizing he still didn't have any official documentation about her assignment. Colonel Harrison approached Sarah, who had paused in her work to stand at attention. "At ease, Mitchell. What's your specialty?" "A-10 systems, sir." Avionics, hydraulics, and general maintenance, Sarah answered crisply. The colonel nodded approvingly. Good to have experienced hands. This bird's been giving us trouble for weeks. Yes, sir. I noticed the hydraulic system logs. It's actually a common issue with aircraft that have seen extensive combat operations. The seals degrade differently under stress conditions. Colonel Harrison raised an eyebrow. You've worked on combat-damaged aircraft? Yes, sir. In various capacities. Mike noticed that Sarah's answers, while respectful and informative, revealed little about where or when she had gained this experience. It was skillful evasion, without being dishonest. As the day continued, Sarah's expertise became increasingly apparent. She diagnosed several issues that the regular maintenance team had missed, including a developing problem with one of the aircraft's control systems that could have become dangerous if left unaddressed. Her suggestions for repairs were innovative yet practical, showing a deep understanding of both the aircraft's design and its real-world operational demands. During lunch break, Mike found himself eating with Sarah in the base cafeteria. The conversation was pleasant but surface level. She asked about the base, the local area, and the squadron's mission, but deflected most questions about her own background with gentle humor, or by turning the conversation back to the aircraft. You really know these planes, Mike observed. I've been working on them for 8 years. And I learned more this morning watching you than I have in months. Sarah smiled, but there was a wistfulness in her expression. The A-10 is a special aircraft. It's built to protect people, to bring everyone home safe. You develop a relationship with a machine like that. Sounds like you've seen some action, Mike ventured. We all serve in different ways, Sarah replied diplomatically. After lunch, Sarah returned to work on the troublesome hydraulic system. Mike watched from a distance as she removed access panels with the confidence of someone who had done this hundreds of times. Her tool handling was precise, and she seemed to know intuitively which systems were interconnected. What really caught Mike's attention was how she talked to the aircraft. It wasn't unusual for mechanics to mutter to themselves while working, but Sarah's quiet comments sounded more like she was talking to an old friend. Come on, girl, let's see what's really bothering you, she murmured, as she probed deeper into the hydraulic assembly. Around 3 in the afternoon, Sarah made a discovery that changed everything. As she traced the hydraulic lines, she found evidence of a manufacturing defect that had been masked by previous repair attempts. It was subtle, something that would only be apparent to someone with extensive experience with combat damage patterns. Mike, she called out, you need to see this. Mike hurried over as Sarah pointed to a section of hydraulic line that appeared normal to his eyes. Look at the stress patterns here, she explained. This isn't normal wear. This line was compromised during manufacturing, probably by improper heat treatment. It's been slowly degrading, but the failure mode is masked by the backup systems. Mike examined the area Sarah indicated. Now that she pointed it out, he could see the subtle differences in the metal's appearance. How did you spot that? Experience, Sarah said simply. I've seen this failure mode before, under different circumstances. The repair required a complete replacement of a major hydraulic assembly, a job that would normally take several days and require specialized parts. But Sarah had already anticipated this, producing a requisition form for the exact components needed. You came prepared, Mike observed. I reviewed the maintenance logs before starting work, Sarah explained. The failure pattern suggested this possibility. As the day drew to a close, Mike found himself increasingly impressed by Sarah's capabilities, but also increasingly curious about her background. Her knowledge went far beyond what any single maintenance assignment would provide. She understood not just how to fix the aircraft, but how it performed under combat conditions, how different types of damage affected various systems, and how to prioritize repairs based on mission requirements. The final clue came near the end of the shift. Sarah was securing her tools when Mike noticed her personal gear bag. Most maintenance workers carried standard-issue tool bags, but Sarah's bag showed signs of extensive field use. It was worn in specific patterns that Mike recognized from deployments, the kind of wear that came from working in austere conditions, possibly under combat situations. Sarah, Mike said as she prepared to leave, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what exactly is your background? Your knowledge of these aircraft goes way beyond normal maintenance experience. Sarah paused, her hand on her gear bag. For a moment, Mike thought she might finally open up about her past. But instead, she smiled mysteriously. Some stories are better told when the time is right, she said. See you tomorrow. Mike. We've got an aircraft to get back in the air. As Sarah walked away across the tarmac, Mike watched her go with a growing sense that there was much more to this temporary maintenance worker than met the eye. Her expertise was undeniable. But it was the way she carried herself, the way she looked at the aircraft, and the way she spoke about their mission that suggested a deeper connection to the A-10 program than she was revealing. That evening, Mike found himself thinking about the day's events. Tomorrow, he decided, he would do some investigating of his own. Something told him that Sarah Mitchell's story was far more interesting than she was letting on, and he was determined to uncover the truth about the mysterious woman who seemed to know his aircraft better than he did himself. The A-10 sat silently in the hangar, waiting for tomorrow's work to continue. But now Mike looked at it differently, wondering what stories it might tell about the woman who had worked on it with such obvious expertise and hidden emotion. Whatever Sarah's secret was, Mike had a feeling it was connected to the proud history of the aircraft they both served. The next morning arrived with an unusual tension in the air. Mike Rodriguez had spent much of the previous evening thinking about Sarah Mitchell and her mysterious expertise with the A-10. He arrived at the base earlier than usual, determined to learn more about the enigmatic woman who had appeared so suddenly in his maintenance section. His first stop was the squadron administrative office, where Senior Airman Lisa Chen handled personnel records and temporary duty assignments. Lisa had been at Davis-Monthan for over 4 years and knew the ins and outs of military bureaucracy better than anyone. "Morning, Lisa," Mike said as he entered the office. "I need to ask you about a temporary assignment that came through yesterday." "Sarah Mitchell?" Lisa looked up from her computer screen, her expression puzzled. "I'm sorry, Mike, but I don't show any temporary duty orders for anyone by that name. When did she check in?" Mike felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. "She was working on the 8-inches Hangar 7 yesterday. Said she was here on temporary assignment." "That's strange," Lisa said, turning to her computer. "Let me check the system." Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she searched through various databases. After several minutes, she looked up with concern. "Mike, there's no record of any Sarah Mitchell being assigned to this base, temporarily or otherwise. No orders, no check-in paperwork, nothing." The knot in Mike's stomach tightened. In the military, people didn't just appear and start working on million-dollar aircraft without proper authorization. Could there be some kind of delay in the paperwork? Possible, but unlikely for someone working on aircraft, Lisa replied. That requires security clearances and specific authorizations. Even emergency assignments require immediate documentation. Unday. Mike thanked Lisa and left the office with more questions than answers. As he walked toward Hangar 7, he saw Sarah's familiar figure already at work on the A-10. She appeared to be installing the hydraulic components they had discussed the previous day, components that shouldn't have arrived for at least another week. "Morning, Sarah," Mike called out as he approached. "You're here early." "Couldn't sleep," Sarah replied, not looking up from her work. "Thought I'd get a head start on this hydraulic system." Mike watched as she worked with the same confident precision he had observed yesterday. "Where did you get those parts? I thought they were on order." "I had some connections who could expedite the delivery," Sarah said casually. "Sometimes it pays to know the right people in supply," Mike nodded. But his suspicions continued to grow. Military supply chains didn't work that way, especially not for specialized aircraft components. Someone had gone to considerable effort to ensure these parts were available, and that level of influence suggested resources far beyond what a temporary maintenance worker would possess. As the morning progressed, Mike found opportunities to ask subtle questions about Sarah's background. Each query was met with vague but plausible answers that revealed nothing concrete. She claimed to have worked at various bases, but never specified which ones or when. She demonstrated knowledge of procedures and regulations, but in a way that could have been learned anywhere in the Air Force maintenance community. Around mid-morning, Chief Master Sergeant Patricia Williams, the squadron's senior enlisted leader, stopped by to check on the A-10's progress. Chief Williams had 30 years of experience and had worked on every aircraft in the Air Force inventory. Her eagle eyes missed nothing. "Rodriguez, I hear you've got some expert help on this bird," Chief Williams said, her gaze settling on Sarah. "Yes, Chief. Sarah Mitchell, temporary assignment," Mike replied. Watching carefully for Chief Williams' reaction, the chief approached Sarah, who immediately stopped work and stood at attention. "At ease. Mitchell, I understand you've made significant progress on this hydraulic problem." "Yes, Chief. The system should be operational by this afternoon," Sarah replied. Chief Williams examined the work in progress, her experienced eyes taking in every detail. "Outstanding work. Your technique is flawless. Where did you learn to work on A-10 systems?" "Various assignments, Chief. The A-10 is a reliable platform once you understand its characteristics." "Indeed it is," Chief Williams agreed. "I've worked on hogs for 15 years, and I can recognize expertise when I see it. You handle these systems like someone with extensive field experience." Mike noticed a brief flicker of emotion cross Sarah's face at the mention of field experience, but it was quickly suppressed. "The A-10 is a special aircraft, Chief. It deserves the best care we can give it," Sarah replied diplomatically. After Chief Williams left, Mike decided to take a more direct approach. During lunch break, he invited Sarah to join him for a walk around the base perimeter. The conversation started casually, but Mike gradually steered it toward more specific topics. "You know, Sarah, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday regarding combat damage patterns," Mike began. "That kind of knowledge usually comes from deployment experience. Have you been overseas?" "Have you been overseas?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her eyes focused on the distant mountains. "Many people serve in different capacities, Mike. Not all contributions to the mission happen in the same way." "That's true," Mike acknowledged. "But your knowledge seems very specific. You understand how these aircraft perform under stress, how battle damage affects systems, and how to prioritize repairs based on mission requirements." "That's not textbook knowledge." Sarah stopped walking and turned to face Mike. For the first time since they had met, her careful composure seemed to crack slightly. "Mike, some experiences are difficult to talk about. Sometimes it's better to focus on the work that needs to be done, rather than dwelling on the past." Mike sensed that he was close to something important. "I'm not trying to pry, Sarah. I'm just curious about someone who obviously cares about these aircraft as much as I do. Your expertise is remarkable, and I'd like to understand where it comes from." "Understanding isn't always necessary for effective collaboration," Sarah replied. But her voice carried a note of sadness that hadn't been there before. That afternoon, as Sarah continued her work on the hydraulic system, Mike made a decision that would change everything. He noticed that Sarah occasionally glanced at her left shoulder. An unconscious gesture that suggested something significant was located there. During a moment when she was focused on a difficult connection, Mike positioned himself where he could see her left shoulder. What he saw made his blood run cold. Partially visible beneath her coveralls was a uniform patch that Mike recognized immediately. The distinctive winged skull insignia of an A-10 pilot. But this wasn't just any pilot patch. It bore additional markings that indicated combat experience and specific mission designations. Mike's mind raced as he processed this information. Sarah wasn't a maintenance worker at all. She was a pilot. But why would an A-10 pilot be working in maintenance coveralls? Essentially undercover. And why did her presence on base appear to be unauthorized? The pieces began to fall into place. Sarah's intimate knowledge of A-10 systems, her understanding of combat damage patterns, her emotional connection to the aircraft. It all made sense if she was a pilot who had flown combat missions in these very aircraft. But what didn't make sense was why she was here, working anonymously in maintenance, with no official record of her presence. Mike continued to observe Sarah throughout the afternoon, now seeing her actions in a completely different light. The way she touched the aircraft's controls wasn't the familiarity of a mechanic. It was the connection of someone who had trusted their life to these systems. Her knowledge of the aircraft's capabilities and limitations came from having pushed them to their limits in actual combat. As the day drew to a close, Sarah completed the hydraulic system repairs. The work was flawless, executed with a level of precision that spoke to both technical expertise and genuine caring for the aircraft. As she cleaned up her tools, Mike struggled with whether to confront her about what he had discovered. The decision was made for him when Colonel Harrison approached for a final inspection of the day's work. As the colonel examined the repairs, his experienced eye caught the same detail that Mike had noticed: the edge of Sarah's pilot patch visible beneath her coveralls. Colonel Harrison's expression changed dramatically. His casual inspection became focused attention as he studied Sarah's face more carefully. Mike could see recognition dawning in the colonel's eyes, and he realized that whatever Sarah's story was, it was about to be revealed. "Mitchell," Colonel Harrison said slowly, "could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Sarah looked up from securing her tools, and Mike saw something he hadn't seen before. Fear. Not the fear of being caught in wrongdoing, but the fear of having to confront something painful from her past. "Of course, sir," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the emotion Mike could see in her eyes. As Colonel Harrison led Sarah away from the aircraft, Mike felt a mixture of anticipation and concern. Whatever was about to be revealed, he sensed it would explain not only Sarah's mysterious expertise but also the sadness he had occasionally glimpsed behind her professional demeanor. The A-10 sat in the hangar, its hydraulic system now fully operational thanks to Sarah's skilled work. But Mike realized that the real story wasn't about the aircraft at all. It was about the woman who had risked exposure to ensure that this particular warthog would be ready to fly again. Whatever had brought Sarah to this hangar in maintenance coveralls, rather than a flight suit, Mike had a feeling it was a story of courage, sacrifice, and a connection to these aircraft that went far deeper than any official assignment could explain. As evening approached, Mike found himself waiting anxiously for Sarah's return, knowing that when she came back, if she came back, everything would be different. The mysterious maintenance worker would be gone, replaced by someone whose true identity would finally be revealed. But Mike also sensed that understanding Sarah's real story might be more complex and emotional than he had ever imagined. The conversation between Colonel Harrison and Sarah took place in the squadron commander's office, away from the curious eyes of the maintenance crew. Mike waited anxiously in the hangar, unable to focus on anything other than what might be transpiring behind those closed doors. 20 minutes felt like hours before the office door finally opened. Colonel Harrison emerged first, his expression unreadable. Sarah followed, and Mike could immediately see that something fundamental had changed. The careful composure she had maintained for 2 days was gone, replaced by a mixture of relief and resignation. There were traces of tears on her cheeks, but also something that looked like peace. "Rodriguez," Colonel Harrison called out, "please join us in the briefing room." Mike followed them into the small conference room adjacent to the hangar. Colonel Harrison gestured for both Mike and Sarah to sit down, then closed the door behind them. "Mike," the colonel began, "I want you to meet Captain Sarah Mitchell, not the maintenance worker you've known for the past 2 days, but Captain Mitchell, one of the most distinguished A-10 pilots in the Air Force." Mike felt his suspicions confirmed, but the reality was somehow more profound than he had imagined. "Captain?" Sarah looked directly at Mike for the first time since her conversation with Colonel Harrison. Her green eyes held a depth of experience and emotion that her maintenance worker persona had only hinted at. "I'm sorry for the deception, Mike," Sarah said quietly. "It wasn't intended to mislead you personally. I needed to be close to the aircraft again." Colonel Harrison leaned forward in his chair. "Captain Mitchell has an extraordinary record. She flew over 200 combat missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, primarily in close air support roles. She received the Distinguished Flying Cross, 3 air medals, and the Purple Heart." Mike's mind raced as he processed this information. The Purple Heart meant Sarah had been wounded in combat. Suddenly, her intimate knowledge of battle damage and her emotional connection to the A-10 took on a much more personal significance. "What happened?" Mike asked gently, sensing there was more to the story. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of painful memories. 18 months ago, I was flying a close air support mission in Afghanistan. Ground troops were pinned down by enemy fire, and my wingman and I were providing cover for their extraction. She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. An IED exploded near their position just as I was making a gun run. The blast wave caught my aircraft. A-10, Colonel Harrison picked up the narrative. Captain Mitchell's A-10 suffered severe damage to both engines and multiple control systems. By all accounts, the aircraft shouldn't have been flyable. But she brought me home, Sarah said softly, and Mike realized she was talking about the aircraft as if it were a living thing. 17 minutes of flying with failing systems, hydraulic fluid streaming from multiple leaks, and one engine completely dead. She kept flying until I could reach the recovery airfield. Mike began to understand the depth of Sarah's connection to the A-10. It wasn't just professional respect. It was the bond between a pilot and the machine that had saved her life. The landing was rough, Sarah continued. I suffered a compression fracture in my spine and some other injuries. The medical board determined that while I could recover physically, the psychological trauma combined with the physical limitations meant I couldn't return to flight status. So they grounded you, Mike said, understanding the devastating impact this would have on a career pilot. Medically retired, Sarah corrected. 18 months ago, I flew my last mission. Since then, I've been struggling to find my place in a world where I'm no longer doing what I was born to do. Colonel Harrison leaned back in his chair. Captain Mitchell, Sarah, has been dealing with depression and PTSD since her retirement. A few weeks ago, she contacted me requesting permission to visit the base and see some A-10 seconds again. She thought it might help with her recovery. But I couldn't just visit, Sarah explained. I needed to do something meaningful. Something that contributed to keeping these aircraft flying. When I learned about the hydraulic problem with this particular A-10, I couldn't just observe from the sidelines. Mike finally understood why Sarah had appeared without official orders, why she had the necessary parts ready, and why her expertise went so far beyond normal maintenance knowledge. You came here to help, but also to heal. In a way, yes, Sarah admitted. Working on these aircraft with my hands, understanding their systems from a different perspective, it's helped me feel connected to the mission again, even if I can't fly. Colonel Harrison nodded approvingly. What Captain Mitchell has accomplished in 2 days is remarkable. Not just technically but personally. She's found a way to contribute that honors her experience while helping her move forward. The question now, Sarah said, looking directly at Mike, is whether you can accept that the woman you've been working with is the same person, whether she's wearing coveralls or a flight suit. Mike stood up and extended his hand to Sarah. Captain Mitchell, it's been an honor working with you. Your knowledge, your dedication, and your love for these aircraft have made me a better mechanic and a better airman. Sarah shook his hand, tears flowing freely now. Thank you, Mike. You treated me with respect and professionalism from the moment we met, even when you suspected something wasn't quite right. Colonel Harrison cleared his throat. Which brings us to the next question. Sarah, what are your plans now? Sarah wiped her eyes and sat up straighter. I've been thinking about that since yesterday. Working on these aircraft again has reminded me that there are many ways to serve. I'd like to explore opportunities in aircraft maintenance, training, or technical instruction. My experience as a pilot gives me insights that could be valuable for training the next generation of maintainers. That's an excellent idea, Mike said enthusiastically. Your understanding of how aircraft systems behave under combat conditions is invaluable. Training programs could really benefit from that perspective. Colonel Harrison nodded. I'll make some calls. There are several training commands that would be very interested in someone with your unique combination of pilot experience and technical knowledge. Over the next hour, they discussed possibilities for Sarah's future. The conversation revealed not just her technical expertise but her deep commitment to the mission and the people who served. Her experience had given her a perspective that few could match. She understood both the capabilities and limitations of the A-10 from the cockpit, and now she was learning to understand them from the maintenance perspective as well. As the day ended, Sarah prepared to remove her maintenance coveralls for the last time. Underneath, She wore a simple Air Force polo shirt that bore her pilot wings, the symbol of the calling she had lost, but was now finding new ways to honor. "Sarah," Mike said as they walked toward the parking area, "I have one more question. Why this particular aircraft? There are dozens of A-10s on this base." Sarah stopped and turned back to look at the Warthog they had spent 2 days repairing. "That aircraft," she said quietly, "is tail number 80-0247. It's the same one that brought me home 18 months ago." Mike felt a chill run down his spine. The coincidence seemed impossible, but as he looked at Sarah's expression, he realized it wasn't coincidence at all. "I've been tracking her service record since my accident," Sarah explained. "When I learned she was here and grounded with mechanical problems, I couldn't stay away. She saved my life once. I owed her the same in return." Colonel Harrison placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "And now she's ready to fly again, thanks to you." "We're both ready," Sarah said, and Mike heard something in her voice he hadn't heard before. Hope. The next morning, Mike arrived at the base to find the A-10 being towed out of the hangar for engine run-up tests. The hydraulic repairs Sarah had made were holding perfectly, and all systems checked out normally. As he watched the ground crew prepare the aircraft for its return to flight status, Mike felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that he had been part of something much more significant than a routine maintenance job. Later that week, Mike received word that Sarah had been selected for a position with Air Education and Training Command, where she would develop curriculum for advanced aircraft maintenance courses. Her unique perspective as both pilot and maintenance expert made her an ideal candidate for training the next generation of A-10 maintainers. 6 months later, Mike received a letter from Sarah, along with a photograph. The picture showed her standing next to a group of young airmen at Shepherd Air Force Base, where she was now an instructor. She was wearing her uniform with pilot wings, but also sporting a new badge, Aircraft Maintenance Instructor. In her letter, she thanked Mike for treating her with respect during her most vulnerable time, and for helping her realize that service could take many forms. The letter concluded with news that made Mike smile. Tail number 80-0247 was back in full service, flying missions with the same reliability that had once saved Sarah's life. The aircraft that had carried a wounded pilot home had been restored by that same pilot's hands, creating a circle of service and dedication that exemplified the best traditions of military aviation. Mike kept the letter in his toolbox, a reminder that sometimes the most important repairs aren't to machines, but to the human spirit. Sarah Mitchell had appeared in his hangar as a mystery, but she had left as an inspiration. Proof that dedication to mission and care for others could overcome even the most devastating setbacks. The A-10 continued its service, carrying new pilots into combat, protected by maintenance procedures that now incorporated lessons learned from someone who had experienced both sides of the relationship between pilot and aircraft. And somewhere in Texas, a former combat pilot was passing on her knowledge to a new generation, ensuring that the bond between aircrew and maintainers would continue to keep everyone coming home safe. In the end, Sarah's deception had revealed a deeper truth about service, sacrifice, and the many ways people find to contribute to something larger than themselves. She had appeared to be cleaning an A-10, but she was actually rebuilding her own life, while ensuring that others would have the same protection she had once depended on. It was a story of healing, purpose, and the unbreakable bonds that connect all who serve in the defense of others.